A warrior queen doesn't ask for anything. Not favors, not shelter, not mercy. She takes what she needs or she dies standing. So when a queen bleeding, cornered, 30 seconds from execution turns to a total stranger and asks him to marry her, that's not romance. Not yet. That's a woman playing the only card left in her hand. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why that question was the smartest move she had, and why it cost her more than any of you will guess. Let's get into it. The border station hadn't seen a real emergency in 14 months, and Captain Elias Rourke had started to like it that way. He stood on the observation deck of the Yssa Meridian, a coffee going cold in his hand, watching a stretch of dead space that human charts labeled Buffer Zone 7, and everyone on the crew just called the nothing. No colonies out here, no trade lanes. Just a strip of stars nobody claimed, which made it the perfect place to station a mid-sized frigate whose only real job was to make sure nobody claimed it by accident. That was the job. Watch the nothing. Log the nothing. Go home. The proximity alarm didn't agree. It came on hard, 3 sharp tones that cut straight through the quiet hum of the bridge, and every head turned at once. Rourke's coffee hit the deck plating before he'd even decided to drop it. "Talk to me," he said. Lieutenant Devon Ashcroft was already hunched over the tactical console, jaw tight. "One contact, sir, coming in fast, too fast, decelerating hard." And he stopped, recalibrated something, tried again. "It's not decelerating clean. It's dying. Hulls venting atmosphere in 6 places. Weapons are hot but not firing. Whatever this is, it's running from something, not looking for a fight. Species? Unknown configuration. Not in any registry we've got." Ashcroft's voice dropped half a register. "Sir, there's a second signature, bigger, trailing about 4 minutes back. That one's not damaged. That one's hunting." Rourke felt the old familiar tightening behind his ribs, the one that had nothing to do with training, and everything to do with 20 years of learning that space didn't send you problems one at a time. It sent them in packs. Comms, hail the lead vessel. Human standard, all frequencies, all translation protocols we've got. Ensign Naomi Reyes worked the board, headset pressed tight to one ear. 10 seconds passed. 15, then her whole posture changed. "Captain, I've got something coming back. It's rough, half the translation matrix is guessing, but she swallowed. They're not asking for help. They're demanding a ceasefire zone. Says we're bound by an accord we've never heard of. Something called the Threnn Sanctity Clause." "Never heard of it," Rourke said. "Neither has the ship's database," Reyes admitted, "but whoever's talking sounds like they expect us to already know." The damaged vessel dropped out of hard burn less than 800 kilometers off their bow, and Rourke got his first real look at it through the forward viewport, a ship built like something between a blade and a cathedral, black hull plating scored with claw-deep burns. One wing of its engine array sheared clean off and sparking uselessly into vacuum. It wasn't graceful anymore. It had been, once, you could still see the bones of something beautiful under all that damage. "They're launching a shuttle," Ashcroft called out. "Small craft, minimal shielding, sir. That thing won't survive contact with our hull at that speed unless somebody on the other end knows exactly what they're doing. Then let's hope they do. Prep the forward bay. Medical standing by. And somebody get me anything on this sanctity clause before that shuttle docks." Nobody found anything in time. The shuttle hit the Meridian's bay hard enough to buckle 2 support struts, and when the airlock cycled open, Rourke's first thought was that he was looking at a funeral procession that had forgotten to stop moving. 6 of them came through, taller than any human on the bridge roster, with skin the color of old iron and eyes that didn't blink the way human eyes did, more like they clicked shut and open in one motion. Their armor was scorched black in patches, cracked along the shoulder seams, and every single one of them was bleeding something that glowed faint silver where it touched open air. At the center of them, upright by will alone as far as Rourke could tell, was a woman who did not look like she needed anyone's help, and clearly needed all of it. She was younger than he expected. That was the first thing that struck him. Oddly younger than the weight in her stance suggested. Younger than the crown of dark, bladed metal fused into her hairline like it had grown there, rather than been placed. Blood, silver and thin, ran from a gash above her brow down the side of a face built entirely out of sharp decisions. She held herself like a woman who had been taught from birth that falling down in front of an enemy was the one unforgivable sin, "Who commands this vessel?" she said. Not a question. Her voice carried across the bay without her raising it, low and rough at the edges, like something that had been shouting for hours and only just stopped. "I do." Rourke stepped forward, hands visible, empty. "Captain Elias Rourke. Human vessel Meridian. You're bleeding pretty badly. We've got medical. There is no time for medical." She said it flatly, like a fact of physics rather than an opinion. Behind her, one of her guards swayed and caught himself against the bulkhead, and she didn't so much as glance back. "The ship behind mine will breach your outer boundary in under 6 minutes. When it does, its commander will invoke claim right against me under Threnn law, and no treaty your species has ever signed will stop him, because you are not signatories to anything that governs my people." Then what does stop him? For the first time, something in her expression cracked not fear exactly. Calculation, giving way, reluctantly, to desperation. "There is one clause," she said. Older than my house. It predates my people's first contact with any spacefaring race, drafted in an age when the Threnn nearly wiped themselves out fighting over crowns. It says a Threnn ruler who is bonded married, and your tongue to an outside power cannot be claimed by combat. Not by rival, not by cousin, not by anyone. The bond itself becomes the shield. It has not been invoked in 400 years because no ruler has ever been desperate enough, or foolish enough, to marry outside her own species while her enemies were still in weapons range. Rourke felt the bridge crew's attention on him like a physical weight, even from 2 decks up on comms relay. "And you're telling me this because in 5 minutes and 40 seconds, Lord Keswick will board this station demanding my life, and the only law strong enough to stop him is a marriage bond. And you are the only human commander standing in front of me." She lifted her chin. Silver blood traced a slow line down her jaw, and she did not wipe it away. "I am Yssa Vharn, sovereign of the Threnn Dominion, last of my line if this fails. And I am asking you, captain, not a soldier, not a title. Will you have me, human?" Somewhere behind Rourke, he heard Reyes forget to breathe. He'd stood on this bridge through pirate raids, through a reactor scare that had come within 90 seconds of cracking the hull, through the kind of silences that meant somebody wasn't coming home. None of it had prepared him for a bleeding queen from a species he'd never heard of asking him to marry her in the next 5 minutes, or watch her die in front of him. "You don't know anything about me," he said, quieter now, like the words belonged just to the two of them even with a dozen witnesses. "You don't know if I'd make this worse. You don't know if I'd survive what comes after. I know you didn't fire on a wounded ship that outmassed yours in weapons alone," Yssa said. "I know you sent medical before you asked what I wanted. Among my people, Captain. That tells me everything I would ever need to know about a man's spine." Her jaw tightened, and for just a moment the Queen slipped, and there was only a woman standing in front of him running out of time and options in equal measure. "I am not asking you to love me. I am asking you to let me live long enough to earn the right to ask you that question honestly, later, when there is no blade at either of our throats." The tactical display behind her painted a slow red line the pursuing warship. "Closing, 4 minutes, Ashcroft said from his station, voice tight. Rourke looked at her, really looked, past the crown and the blood and the impossible request, at the eyes that weren't asking him to be a hero, only to be quick. "There's protocol," he said. "Chain of command, legal witnesses, a dozen things that there is no time for your protocol." Yssa took 1 step closer, close enough now that he could see her hands were shaking, just slightly, just once, before she locked them still by pure force of will. "There is only the next 3 minutes, and what you decide to do with them." Somewhere down the corridor, the ship's proximity alarm pitched the sound of something enormous coming into range. Rourke had exactly 1 heartbeat left to decide whether he was about to marry a stranger to save her life, or watch a queen die on his ship because he'd needed 1 second longer to think about it than the universe had been willing to give him. 3 minutes, Ashcroft called out, and his voice had lost every trace of its usual dry calm. "Sir, I need an order. Any order." Rourke didn't look away from her. "Ashcroft, patch me to ship's legal registry, emergency override, my authorization code. Now." "Reyes, get a witness log running, audio and visual, full record, no edits, time-stamped, copy that running." Reyes's hands were flying over her console, and if her voice shook a little, nobody on that bridge was going to hold it against her. Yssa's eyes hadn't left his. You're saying yes. I'm saying I'm not going to be the reason a person dies because I needed a committee meeting first. Rourke exhaled, hard, like a man stepping off a ledge he'd already decided to jump from. Under human maritime and deep space command law, a ship's captain can perform a binding union in the absence of civil authority, provided there's witness and record. I don't know if that satisfies whatever 400-year-old clause your people wrote, but it's what I've got. It will satisfy it. For the first time since she'd walked through that airlock, something loosened in Yssa's shoulders, not relief, not yet, but the specific relief of a woman who has just stopped falling and started, instead, to fight. Threnn law does not care about the shape of the ceremony. It cares about the binding of intent, witnessed and spoken. Say the words. I will say mine. That is enough. 2 minutes 40, Ashcroft said. Rourke reached out slowly, the way you'd reach towards something wild and wounded, giving it every chance to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was cooler than his, rougher, marked along the knuckles with old scars that had nothing to do with today's fight. Her fingers closed around his like she was gripping the edge of a cliff. I, Elias Rourke, take you, Yssa Vharn, as my bonded partner, he said, and the words came out steadier than he felt, under the law of my people and, apparently yours, for whatever that's worth in the next 90 seconds. A ghost of something crossed her face, not quite a smile, too tired and too frightened to fully arrive, but close. I, Yssa Vharn, sovereign of the Threnn Dominion, take you, Elias Rourke, as my bonded partner, under the ancient law of my house, and I swear before whatever gods are still listening that I will not waste the life you have just handed me. The proximity alarm shifted again, a deeper, heavier tone that made the deck plating hum faintly under their boots. He's here, Yssa said quietly. Let's just sit with that for 1 second, because think about what he actually just did. He didn't marry her because he loved her. He barely knew her name for longer than 5 minutes. He did it because he looked at a person about to die and decided that was reason enough. That's not a fairy tale decision. That's a spine. Keep that in mind. Because everything that happens next is going to test whether a 5-minute vow can survive contact with an actual war. The warship that dropped out of hard burn off the Meridian's starboard side was nothing like Yssa's. No damage, no desperation, just clean black hull and weapons arrays that tracked with the patient confidence of something that had never once lost a fight it started. They're hailing, Reyes said. Audio only, no video feed offered. Put it through. The voice that came across the bridge was deep and unhurried, almost bored. The voice of a man reading out a verdict he already knew the ending of. Human vessel, you harbor a fugitive of Threnn law. Sovereign Yssa Vharn is claimed under combat right by House Drade. Surrender her, and this matter concludes without further incident to your station. Rourke keyed the comm open. This is Captain Elias Rourke of the Yssa Meridian. There's no fugitive aboard this ship. There's my wife. Silence stretched across the channel for 3 full seconds, long enough that Ashcroft actually looked up from his console to check the connection hadn't dropped. When Kessick Drade spoke again, the boredom was gone. Say that again. You heard me the first time. That is not possible. The sanctity clause requires witnessed, lawful binding under recognized authority. A human captain performing some backwater ritual for a dying woman does not. It's recognized under my authority as commanding officer of a sovereign human vessel. Logged and witnessed under deep space maritime law. Time-stamped 4 minutes ago. Rourke kept his voice level, the way he'd learned to during hostage standoffs and reactor scares and every other moment where the only thing keeping a room from tipping into chaos was one person sounding like they weren't afraid. You want to argue jurisdiction? You can take it up with the accord your own ancestors wrote. I didn't pick the rules. I just followed them faster than you did. Beside him, Yussa's grip on his hand tightened, hard enough to hurt, though her face gave away nothing to the open channel. You understand, Drade said slowly, that this changes nothing about what she owes House Drade. Debts of blood do not dissolve because a woman finds a clever loophole and a foolish alien to hide behind. Then take it up with a court, Rourke said. Because right now, the only thing standing in front of you is a ceasefire clause your people wrote and swore to honor, and a captain who is not moving out of the way. The channel went dead. He's not disengaging, Ashcroft warned. Weapons are still hot. He's just sitting there. He's deciding whether to burn 400 years of his own law to get what he wants, Yssa murmured, low enough that only Rourke caught it. Drade has never once in his life accepted a rule he couldn't bend. Watch him closely, Captain. This isn't over. It's only paused. They gave her a cabin 2 decks down, small and gray and entirely unglamorous. And Rourke found himself standing in the doorway of it 40 minutes later with a first aid kit he wasn't entirely sure she'd let him use. Your medical officer already treated the worst of it, Yssa said, not looking up from where she sat on the edge of the bunk, working a strip of black cloth into a fresh bandage around her forearm with hands that clearly had done this 100 times before. The crown was gone now, set aside on the small metal desk, and without it she looked less like a legend and more like a woman in her 30s who hadn't slept properly in days. I'm aware. I'm also aware you didn't let her look at whatever's under that wrap on your side. Yssa's hand stilled for just a second. It's manageable. That's not what I asked. She looked up at him then, and there was something almost startled in her expression, like she hadn't expected him to notice, or hadn't expected anyone to care enough to push. Why does it matter to you? We are bonded by law, Captain, not by anything real. You don't owe me concern beyond what the clause requires. Maybe not. Rourke crossed the small room and crouched down in front of her, kit open, waiting. But I didn't marry a legal document 40 minutes ago. I married a person who's bleeding in front of me. Let me help or don't. But don't pretend it's not my business anymore. Something in her face shifted, not surrender exactly. Yssa Vharn didn't strike him as a woman built for surrender, but a kind of quiet recalibration, like she was updating an old, careful map of the world to include one new and unexpected feature. She turned, wordless, and let him see the wound along her ribs, deep enough that the medic's temporary seal had already started to fail at one edge. Keswick did this 3 days ago, she said while Rourke worked, his hands careful, his voice steady even though his pulse hadn't fully settled since the bridge. Not in honest combat. A blade in the dark, in my own war room, from a man I called cousin until the moment he decided my crown suited him better than mine did my head. My guard got me out. Most of them did not survive doing it. I'm sorry. Do not be. I am not telling you this for your sympathy. Her voice hardened, though she didn't pull away from his hands. I am telling you because you deserve to know exactly what you signed on to 40 minutes ago, Captain. This is not a fairy tale where a wedding solves a war. Keswick will not stop because a piece of paper says he must. Men like him only stop when they are made to, and I have brought that fight to your ship, to your crew, to a station that had nothing to do with any of it until I bled onto your bay floor. Rourke finished the last wrap of the bandage and sat back on his heels, looking at her, really looking, the way he had on the bridge, past the crown and the blood and the impossible circumstances. You could have let him have you, he said quietly. Could have saved my crew that fight. Why didn't you? Issa's jaw tightened, and for a moment he thought she wouldn't answer at all. Because I have spent every day since I was 9 years old being told what a queen owes her enemies, she said finally. I have never once been told what she is allowed to want for herself. When I saw your ship on our scopes, dying, out of options, I made a choice that was entirely mine for the first time in longer than I can remember. Her eyes met his, steady now, stripped of the Queen's armor for just a moment. I am not sorry I chose to live, Captain, even if living means dragging you into a war you did not ask for. Elias, he said. She blinked. What? My name. If we're married, you can use it. The ghost of a smile again, a little less tired this time, a little more real. Elias, she said, testing the shape of it like it belonged to a language she was only beginning to learn. Then you may use mine as well. Yssa is enough. I have had my fill of titles for one lifetime. The intercom crackled before either of them could say anything else. Ashcroft's voice, tight and fast. Captain Bridge, now, Drade's ship just launched something, and it isn't a shuttle. Rourke was already moving before Ashcroft finished the sentence, taking the corridor 2 decks up at a dead run, Yssa half a step behind him despite the wound in her side, refusing every offer to slow down. Report, he snapped, hitting the bridge at a near sprint. Torpedo-class object, but the signature's wrong. Ashcroft's hands didn't stop moving across the console. It's not carrying standard warhead readings. It's carrying a boarding pod. Small, fast, minimal shielding. He's not trying to blow us out of space. He's trying to take her by force, inside my ship. Rourke's jaw tightened. Time to impact? 90 seconds if it holds this vector. Yssa stepped up beside the tactical display, eyes narrowing at the trajectory line. That is a Threnn extraction pod. 4 occupants, built for close quarters retrieval. Keswick isn't trying to kill me anymore, Captain. He's trying to prove the bond doesn't count if he simply removes me from your ship before any tribunal can rule on it. Possession over law. Can we shoot it down? You could, Yssa said, but it will not stop him. He will simply send another, and another, until either I am gone or your ship is a wreck. Keswick Drade has never once respected a boundary he could not physically walk through. Rourke felt something settle in him, then not panic, which had already burned off somewhere between the airlock and the bridge, but a colder, more useful kind of clarity. 20 years of command had taught him that the moment you started reacting to a man like Drade, you'd already lost. You had to make him react to you. Ashcroft, target the pod, but hold fire on my mark. Reyes, open a channel to Drade's ship, ship-wide priority, and patch it through every speaker on this deck. Sir, do it. The channel opened with a soft chime, and Rourke's voice went out not just to Drade's bridge, but through the Meridian's own corridors, loud enough that half the crew not currently at their stations could hear it too. Lord Drade, you've got a boarding pod 60 seconds from my hull. I want you to understand something before it gets here. This is a human vessel, under human law, and the woman aboard it is my wife under a clause your own ancestors wrote into treaty 4 centuries ago. If that pod breaches my hull without my consent, that's not a rescue, and it's not combat right. That's an act of war against a sovereign human ship, and I will treat it exactly like one. My weapons crew already has a firing solution on your vessel's primary reactor housing. You board me illegally, I put a hole through the thing keeping your whole crew breathing. Your call, Lord Drade, but you should know I already promised her I wouldn't be the reason she died today. I don't see why that promise should stop applying to the rest of you. Silence stretched across the channel. On the tactical display, the boarding pod's countdown ticked down 40 seconds, 35. Yissa's hand found his arm, not to stop him, he realized, but simply to steady herself. He will not believe you're willing to fire on a sovereign vessel over one woman. Then he doesn't know me very well yet, Rourke said. Give him time. 20 seconds. Ashcroft's voice was tight. Pod's still inbound, sir. No change in vector 15 seconds. Rourke didn't move, didn't blink, kept his eyes fixed on the display like he could will the outcome into being through sheer refusal to look away. At 8 seconds, the pod's engines flared bright, hard, and the trajectory line bent away from the Meridian's hull in a wide, reluctant arc. Curving back toward Drade's ship instead, the bridge exhaled as one organism. He's recalling it, Ashcroft said, disbelief warm under the words. Pod's returning to the mothership. Captain, he actually pulled it back. Drade's voice came through the channel a moment later, stripped of its earlier boredom, carrying instead something colder and more dangerous, the voice of a man recalculating an enemy he'd underestimated. This is not finished. Human, you've bought her time, nothing more. The Threnn High Court will hear of this. We will see whether your quaint little ceremony holds up under formal review, in front of judges who do not owe you the courtesy I just extended. Then I'll see you there, Rourke said. Bring your paperwork. I'll bring mine. The channel cut. On the display, Drade's warship began a slow, grudging retreat, weapons powering down, engines swinging toward open space. Nobody on the bridge moved for a full 3 seconds, like they were all waiting for the trick. The second wave. The part where it turned out to be a feint. When it didn't come, Reyes let out a breath that was half laugh, half something closer to tears, and Ashcroft actually grinned, wide and disbelieving, before catching himself and turning it back into something more professional. Yssa was still holding Rourke's arm. He turned to find her looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her yet, not the Queen's mask, not the desperate calculation from the airlock. Something quieter, something that looked almost like she was seeing him for the first time too. You bluffed a man's entire war fleet, she said, over a bond that is barely 2 hours old. I don't bluff about people I've decided to protect. Rourke's voice was rougher than he meant it to be. Married or not, wife or not, you walked onto my ship bleeding and asked me for exactly one thing. I wasn't going to hand you back over a technicality. The High Court will still summon us, Yssa said quietly. Keswick is not wrong about that. He will drag this in front of judges who have never in 400 years had to actually enforce that clause. and there is no guarantee they will rule in our favor simply because you were braver than he expected. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. Rourke held her gaze, steady, one crisis at a time. Yssa, that's the only way anybody survives out here. Here's the part that gets me, watching this play out. Rourke didn't win that standoff because he had better weapons. He didn't. He won it because he was willing to mean what he said. Completely, with nothing held back, in a way Drade clearly wasn't used to encountering. That's the whole trick of courage, honestly. Most people who threaten a fight are hoping they won't have to follow through. The dangerous ones are the ones who actually will. Keep that in your back pocket, because it matters for what happens next. 3 days later, the Meridian held position at the edge of Threnn space while a shuttle carrying 2 High Court magistrates docked in the forward bay, gray-robed, ancient-eyed, moving with the unhurried gravity of people who had spent centuries interpreting law that predated most living memory. Rourke stood beside Yssa in the ship's largest conference room, her crown back in place, her bearing once again every inch the sovereign who had first stepped off that dying shuttle, though her hand found his beneath the table where the magistrates couldn't see it. "The clause is old," the elder magistrate said, voice like stone worn smooth by centuries of water. "Older than either of your governments. It was written by rulers who understood something modern houses have forgotten, that power without limits becomes indistinguishable from tyranny, and that even a queen needs one door left open that her enemies cannot force closed." Her ancient eyes moved from Yssa to Rourke, and back again. The binding was witnessed. Logged, spoken freely. "Under duress but not under coercion there is a difference in our law, Captain, and you should know your record satisfied it." House Drade's claim is void. Something in Yissa's shoulders released, so slightly Rourke doubted anyone else in the room caught it. "There remains," the second magistrate added, "the matter of House Drade's attempted assassination and subsequent illegal boarding action. That is no longer a question of marriage law. That is a war crime under Threnn statute, and Lord Drade will answer for it before this court. With or without your testimony, Sovereign, he will have it," Yssa said, and there was nothing soft in her voice now. In full. The magistrates withdrew an hour later, and the conference room emptied out slow, crew filing back to their stations, until it was only the two of them left with the low hum of the ship around them and the strange, settling silence of a crisis finally, actually over. "You could annul it now," Yssa said, not looking at him, studying the star field through the viewport instead. "The clause has served its purpose. The court has ruled. Nothing binds you to a woman you met 3 days ago in the middle of an assassination attempt. Is that what you want?" She didn't answer right away, and the not answering told him more than words might have. "I have spent my whole life being told what I owe to duty," she said finally. "I do not know, honestly, how to want something simply because it is mine to want. But I know that when Keswick's pod turned back toward his ship, the first thing I felt was not relief that I was safe. It was relief that you were." Rourke crossed the room and stood beside her at the viewport, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I told you on the bridge I didn't marry a legal document. I'm not in the habit of walking that back just because the emergency's over." Yssa finally turned to look at him, and for the first time since the airlock, since the blood and the crown and the impossible question, there was nothing calculating in her expression at all. Just a woman, tired and free and cautiously, carefully, beginning to hope. "Then perhaps," she said, "we find out together what a marriage looks like when nobody's dying to make it necessary." Outside the viewport, Threnn space stretched out dark and unfamiliar, and for the first time in 3 days, entirely unthreatening, just stars, waiting, the way they always did, for whatever came next. And that's the story. Not a fairy tale rescue, not 2 people falling in love at first sight, just one impossible decision made in 90 seconds flat. And everything that had to be built afterward to make that decision actually mean something. That's the part I keep coming back to. Anyone can say yes in a crisis. It's staying married to the choice once the crisis is over that actually tells you who somebody is. If you enjoyed riding along on this one, it genuinely helps more than you'd think to leave the video a like and drop a comment. I read every single one, and they're a huge part of deciding what story comes next. And if you want more of these waiting for you, HFY Soundscape is the place to subscribe. See you in the next one.